The moment I stepped into the office, my manager spotted me, his face filled with anger. He marched toward me like a bulldog.
Charlotte, where the hell have you been?
I'm sorry. There was this pregnant woman being robbed, and I helped her. Before I could finish, he slapped me harshly across my face. I stood there, stunned, too shocked to even respond.
You think I care about your excuses?
He slapped me again.
You're late. You think you can just stroll in here whenever you feel like it?
I couldn't say a word. The rest of the office was silent, everyone watching, but no one daring to intervene. This wasn't the first time he had hit someone, but it was the first time it had happened to me.
You're fired. Get your things and get out. I don't need lazy idiots like you ruining my team.
I didn't know what to say. I felt numb. I don't think I'll ever forget that day, the day my life changed in ways I hadn't imagined. It all began on a normal morning, a day I was meant to be at work like any other. My job was nothing special, an average desk job at a company where I reported to an increasingly hostile and unreasonable manager. But even with that, I took pride in my work. I was punctual, never complained, and did my best to meet deadlines, no matter how unfair the demands were. My manager, though, seemed to always have a reason to single me out. It felt like I was his personal punching bag. There was that time I had stayed late to finish a report for him, and when I asked for a slight adjustment in the deadline, he laughed in my face.
You think I'm here to babysit you, Charlotte? If you can't do the job, maybe you should leave. We don't have room for weaklings here.
I remember blinking, not saying a word in my defense. There was no point. He was the kind of man who got off on making others feel small, so I just nodded and stayed an extra 4 hours to finish the work. No overtime, of course. He didn't believe in that. Then there was the time he caught me talking to a colleague during lunch.
This isn't a social club, Charlotte. You come here to work. If you have time to chat, I'll give you something more useful to do.
I wasn't even on the clock then, but again, I didn't bother arguing. He had made life miserable for others who tried. People talked about how he was always finding new ways to withhold bonuses or delay salary payments. Then one faithful day, as I was walking to work, something unexpected happened. I was about to cross the street when I saw a pregnant woman, maybe about 7 months along, walking ahead of me. She was alone, carrying several shopping bags, probably groceries or baby things. At first, it didn't seem like anything was wrong. But then, just as she was about to turn the corner, 2 men approached her. Their faces were covered by hoods, and I saw them eyeing her like predators sizing up their prey. They reached her before I could even shout a warning.
Get away from me!
One of them grabbed her purse and she stumbled back, almost falling over. I couldn't just stand there and watch. I ran over, not thinking about the consequences or the fact that there were 2 of them and only 1 of me. Hey, leave her alone. I barely had time to process what happened next. One of the men turned to me and swung his fist. I dodged the punch. I grabbed the other man's arm as he tried to snatch the woman's purse again, pulling him back with all my strength. There was a brief struggle, but soon, people nearby noticed the commotion, and the robbers panicked. They took off, dropping the purse and some of her bags as they ran. The woman was shaken, holding her stomach as she tried to calm herself.
Thank you so much. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in.
I nodded, out of breath, but relieved she was all right. It's okay. You're safe now. We called the police, and luckily, they arrived within minutes. The robbers were caught not too far from where they had run off, and they were arrested on the spot. The woman thanked me repeatedly as she made sure everything was accounted for.
I owe you. Can I at least have your name? Maybe your number, so I can properly thank you later?
I hesitated for a second, but gave her my contact details anyway. She insisted on knowing where I worked, which I found a little odd, but I told her the name of the company, and even mentioned my department.
I'll make sure to visit and let your boss know how kind you were. Take care.
I was happy I had helped her, but I was also aware that I was going to be late for work. My manager wasn't exactly the forgiving type, but I hoped he would understand once I explained the situation. I was wrong. The moment I stepped into the office, my manager spotted me, his face filled with anger. He marched toward me like a bulldog.
Charlotte, where the hell have you been?
I'm sorry. There was this pregnant woman being robbed, and I helped her. Before I could finish, he slapped me harshly across my face. I stood there, stunned, too shocked to even respond.
You think I care about your excuses?
He slapped me again.
You're late. You think you can just stroll in here whenever you feel like it?
I couldn't say a word. The rest of the office was silent, everyone watching, but no one daring to intervene. This wasn't the first time he had hit someone, but it was the first time it had happened to me.
You're fired. Get your things and get out. I don't need lazy idiots like you ruining my team.
I didn't know what to say. I felt numb. I had just been fired for saving someone's life. As I packed up my desk, I could feel the eyes of my coworkers on me, but none of them said a word. They were afraid, and I couldn't blame them. I left the office that day with a heavy heart. My manager had always been cruel, but this was a new low. I went home, devastated. What was I supposed to do now? How was I supposed to pay my bills? Maybe if I hadn't stopped to help, I wouldn't have lost my job. But no, I shook the thought away. I had done the right thing. 2 days passed, and I was still trying to figure out my next steps when I received a phone call.
Charlotte, it's me, the pregnant woman you helped the other day. Could you meet me at your company today?
I can't. I was fired, and I'm not allowed on the premises anymore.
Come anyway, trust me, just come.
I hesitated but decided to go. When I arrived at the company, I was nervous. What if my manager saw me? Would he have me thrown out? But when I stepped inside, the receptionist greeted me with a smile and directed me to the CEO's office. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I followed her instructions. When I entered the CEO's office, I was surprised to see the pregnant woman sitting there, smiling warmly at me, and beside her, the CEO himself.
This is my husband, and I wanted you to meet him because we found out what happened to you.
She went on to explain how she had inquired about me with the manager after our incident, but the manager had lied, telling them that I had been fired for being irresponsible. But that wasn't the end of the story.
Luckily, one of your co-workers told us the truth. In fact, several of them did. They told us about how your manager has been treating everyone, how he delays payments, withholds bonuses, and mistreats the staff.
We were furious when we found out. That man has been abusing his position for too long, and we're going to deal with him today.
They called a company-wide meeting and gathered all the employees in the main hall. I stood to the side, unsure of what was going to happen next. The manager walked in, his usual proud expression plastered on his face, but that quickly faded when he saw the CEO standing in front of everyone and his pregnant wife beside him.
We've received some disturbing reports about your conduct as a manager. Also, the day you fired Charlotte, she was in fact helping my wife. Your time here is over. What? These are lies. Charlotte was irresponsible. She lied. Oh, shut up. You've been mistreating my staff, underpaying them, and abusing your power. I have seen videos of you even physically abusing them. I should have fired you a long time ago. Now, hand over the keys to the company car.
The manager was shocked, but he had no choice. Under the watchful eyes of the CEO and all the employees, he handed over the keys.
You're no longer a part of this company. Effective immediately, you're terminated. Please, there must be some mistake. I've been loyal to this company for years. I made sacrifices. Enough. Your loyalty was to your own ego, not this company. You took advantage of the people who trusted you, and it ends today. Security.
2 guards appeared at the door.
Wait, Charlotte, you know me. You can tell them, can't you? I wasn't that bad.
I stared at him with anger. There had been so many times I had wished for this moment when he would finally get what he deserved, and now it was happening. I could still feel the sting of his hand on my face, the humiliation of being fired for doing the right thing. No, I didn't owe him anything. You treated us like dirt. And now you're getting what you deserve. Leave our company! The guards immediately grabbed him and dragged him out of the hall and the company. He wasn't allowed to take anything. It was a disgraceful termination.
You all did the right thing. We won't let someone like that hurt others anymore.
From this day forward, things will change around here. We're going to rebuild trust, and we're going to make sure everyone is treated fairly. We've been blind to what was happening, and for that, I apologize. Charlotte, I know you've been through a lot because of that man, and I want to make it right. You've shown incredible integrity and bravery, not just in helping my wife, but in standing up to injustice. That's the kind of leadership we need in this company. We'd like to offer you the position of manager. I think you'll do a far better job than that old fool.
I couldn't believe my ears. Me? A manager? It was shocking. But then I realized something. I had earned this. I had worked hard, endured hardships, and now I had the chance to make things better, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been mistreated by the previous manager. Yes, I'll do it. The employees clapped, some of them coming over to shake my hand, congratulating me on the promotion. It felt unreal. Just days ago, I was fired and humiliated, but now I am the new manager.
There's one more thing we want to do. We've been speaking with some of the employees, and we want to make sure everyone gets the back pay they're owed. We'll also be restructuring the bonus system to ensure fairness.
Everyone couldn't stop thanking them. I stepped into my role as manager, and everyone cooperated with me to make the company a better place. The former manager visited a week later and gave an apology to everyone in the company. Afterward, he called me and the CEO, requesting to be brought back in.
Since I've apologized, I deserve my position back. I can't imagine not working here, and I'm sure Charlotte knows that I'm a better manager.
That was it for the CEO. He got angry and slapped the former manager.
She's the best for the work. You can't compare to her. Now get out of here, and don't ever show your face here, or I'll involve the cops.
He went down on his knees, begging. I immediately called security, who chased him out of the company with dogs. Those who saw him running burst into laughter. It was quite a funny scene. Some even recorded how he ran, fell, got back up, and how his pants tore as he ran. Videos of him fleeing from the dogs were posted online, and kids made fun of him, giving him the nickname, the Dog Runner. That wasn't the last time I heard of him. The next time was 2 years later. He was now working as a receptionist at a hotel where I was having a meeting with some clients. I got to know that his wife and children had left him over domestic abuse. His wife had sued him and left with half his property. He was required to work because he was mandated to take care of his kids. My colleagues and I were leaving the hotel when we heard a loud noise. When we looked, it was my former manager. His boss had just slapped him. When he saw me, he quickly hid his face. I laughed loudly and walked past him. I would have spoken to him, but a man like him doesn't even deserve to hear my voice. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment. We'll do our best to reply.
My biological father? I didn't think about him. I hadn't heard from him since my mom took me. He didn't care about me. And as far as I was concerned, he was in the past, and I had moved on. That all changed one day when he showed up at my hospital. The moment I saw him, everything froze. I hadn't seen him in over 20 years, but there he was, lying on a stretcher, bloodied and bruised from a road accident. He looked fragile and old. My first instinct was to turn away, to pretend I didn't know him. But I couldn't. Not this time. One of the nurses came over.
Dr. James, the patient has suffered multiple fractures and he needs surgery immediately.
Could I really save and forgive the man who had destroyed my life? The man who gave my mother the disease that eventually killed her? No way. He deserved to be punished. I ordered the team to prepare him for surgery. The procedure went smoothly. I did my job, but made sure it wasn't complete. I did it in a way that sooner or later, his limbs would give up. I guess, to anyone looking from the outside, my childhood seemed perfect. My parents were well off, successful in every sense that society measures success. My dad owned several businesses, and my mom was some kind of socialite, constantly hosting parties and attending galas. People would stop me at school, admiring how lucky I was to be born into such a prestigious family. What they didn't know was that my life was a far cry from what you'd expect. Sure, I lived in a big house, filled with expensive furniture and the latest toys, but the house always felt empty. There was no warmth in it. Just me, alone, with a rotating cast of nannies and staff who weren't allowed to get too close. The truth is, I barely knew my parents. They were always too busy for me, always too distracted by their own lives to be parents. I still remember sitting by the window, waiting for them to come home. They would promise they'd be back by dinner time, but night after night, I ended up eating alone at the big dining table. The silence was suffocating. My father would occasionally pop his head in just to say goodnight before he rushed out for another meeting or another trip, and my mom would send a gift or two, as if a toy could make up for her absence. I wanted nothing more than just to sit with them, even for 5 minutes, but those 5 minutes never came. It didn't take long for me to realize that my parents' relationship was falling apart. I was just a kid, but even I could see the cracks. They fought constantly. When they were home, the house wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with shouting. I remember hiding in my room, trying to block out the sound of their arguments. They would argue about money, about business deals that went wrong, but more often, they fought about infidelity. They always accused each other of cheating. Once, I overheard my mother talking to a friend on the phone.
I'm not staying in this marriage for him.
I knew she wasn't talking about my father. She was talking about me. I was only 7 years old, but the weight of those words crushed me. I couldn't understand why they didn't love me enough to stay or even try. When I turned 8, things got worse. The arguments turned into long stretches where they would just disappear, leaving me behind without a word. Eventually, the staff started to disappear too. There were days when I wouldn't see a single adult in the house. I felt like I was living in some forgotten corner of the world, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to protect me. One night, it all came to a head. I was trying to fall asleep when I heard the loud crash of something breaking downstairs. I rushed out of my room and found my mom in the kitchen, throwing plates at my dad. The ground was littered with broken glass, and my father just stood there, watching her with pure anger. He didn't even flinch when a plate shattered inches away from him.
I'm divorcing you. I'm not doing this with you anymore. You stupid, cheating man.
I'm done with you too. Fine. Let's get that divorce you want so badly. That was it. No explanation. Just those words. My mom packed her bags and mine, then took me with her. I didn't know where she took me to, but I knew it was very far away. She kept apologizing to me every day for being a bad mother. Then one day, I overheard her again on the phone with her friend.
That bastard gave me HIV. I'm gonna die soon. I can't believe he hasn't even called once to check up on his son. What will I do with my life?
I cried myself to sleep that night. My mom had HIV, and my dad didn't even care about me anymore. I had hoped so much that my mom wouldn't die, but she found out about the HIV too late, and apparently it had already done a lot of damage. Eventually, she did pass away, just a few months after that call. She died in her room. I was devastated because, in those few months, she had truly changed toward me. She was good to me and never made me feel the absence of my dad. Her best friend was the one who buried her. But because she couldn't shoulder my responsibility by taking me in, I was sent to an adoption center. There, I shared a room with 3 other boys, all older than me, and they didn't hesitate to remind me that I was the new kid. We fought often, over beds, food, anything we could find to fight about. I was angry at the world, at my dad, at myself. I hated being there, and I hated that no one wanted me. But things started to change slowly. The staff at the agency were kind, and they tried their best to make the place feel like a home. One day, a couple came to the agency. They were different from the others who visited. They didn't rush through the process like most parents did. They spent time with all of us, talked to us like we were people, not just names on a list. When they met me, I could feel something was different. They asked me questions no one had ever bothered to ask before. They wanted to know about me, what I liked, what I was afraid of, what I wanted for my future. They visited a few more times after that, each time spending more and more time with me. Eventually, they told me they wanted to adopt me. I was excited. Moving in with them was like stepping into a whole new world. Their house was bigger and fancier than the one I grew up in, but it was a real home. They had 2 other children, both older than me, and they welcomed me like a little brother. I couldn't believe it. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. My adoptive parents were everything my biological parents weren't. They cared about me. They encouraged me to do well in school, helped me with my homework, and celebrated my achievements, no matter how small. And I wanted to repay them for everything they had done for me. I worked hard in school and made sure I got the best grades I could. They never pressured me, but I didn't want to let them down. I wanted to show them that I was worth the love they had given me. They saw me through college, making sure I never lacked anything. And when I graduated with honors, they were there, cheering for me. I became a doctor, just like I had always dreamed. My adoptive parents gifted me a fully equipped hospital to officially begin my career as a doctor. I couldn't be happier. Their children helped me in employing qualified people, because both of them were in that field. Life was good. I had a successful career, a loving family, and friends who cared about me. My biological father? I didn't think about him. I hadn't heard from him since my mom took me. He didn't care about me. And as far as I was concerned, he was in the past, and I had moved on. That all changed one day when he showed up at my hospital. The moment I saw him, everything froze. I hadn't seen him in over 20 years, but there he was, lying on a stretcher, bloodied and bruised from a road accident. He looked fragile and old. My first instinct was to turn away, to pretend I didn't know him. But I couldn't. Not this time. One of the nurses came over.
Dr. James, the patient has suffered multiple fractures and he needs surgery immediately.
Could I really save and forgive the man who had destroyed my life? The man who gave my mother the disease that eventually killed her? No way. He deserved to be punished. I ordered the team to prepare him for surgery. The procedure went smoothly. I did my job, but made sure it wasn't complete. I did it in a way that sooner or later, his limbs would give up. One of his coworkers was in charge of handling his bills. Of course, from my dad's pocket. I learned that he was now working under someone. His businesses had crumbled. But that didn't stop me from charging him more than I usually did. Every hour he spent on the bed, he was charged 3 times the usual amount for it. When he woke up a few days later, he requested to speak to me. Of course I agreed. We had a lot to talk about.
Son, I can't believe this. You're a doctor now?
Firstly, don't call me your son. You lost the right to do so years ago. Secondly, yes, I'm a doctor now. Thanks to my adoptive parents, the ones who cared about me when you didn't. He bowed his head in shame.
I know I made mistakes, James. A lot of them.
Mistakes? You didn't just make mistakes. You ruined my life. You gave Mom HIV, and she died because of you. You abandoned me. You never once tried to reach out after she took me. Mom died because of you. You didn't even bother to check on us. You didn't care.
I was wrong, James. I don't have any excuse. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Forgive me, please.
You think saying sorry will fix anything? You're so selfish. You think you're worth my forgiveness? No. You're so evil. I wasn't going to forgive him. Not after everything he'd done. Before I left his ward, he shamelessly asked if I could charge him less, as he was already going broke.
I know we're not on good terms, but could you consider me, please? I'm your father. You should even make my treatments free. But if you don't want to, please reduce the price.
I should consider you? You didn't have any consideration when you abandoned me. You'll pay every cent, or I'll make sure you're in debt for the rest of your life. He still had to spend 2 more weeks at the hospital, but I didn't care. My aim was to make him go broke. I didn't stop there. His punishment wasn't over. I noticed that his coworker had a loud mouth, so I used him for my revenge. I pretended to break down in front of him when he came to tell me he'd paid the bills for the day. He asked what the matter was, and I told him his colleague was my father, who'd given my mom HIV and abandoned us. The man was shocked and comforted me.
I can't believe he did something so cruel. He always told us he didn't have a family.
I was even more infuriated hearing that he'd denied my mom and I to people he knew. It broke my heart even more. The man stopped coming to the hospital, and my dad had to be doing the payments himself. 1 week later, my dad called me again.
I've been fired from the company, James. I'm going broke, and I'm not even getting any better. Help me, please. I'm going to be penniless if you don't help me.
I refused. In fact, I made him buy an expensive wheelchair. The day he couldn't pay his bills, I asked him to leave my hospital. His wounds were nearly healed, but he couldn't walk. I asked one of my nurses to wheel him out of the hospital. I finally felt completely fulfilled. He no longer had anyone by his side, and he didn't have a job either because the company had fired him for lying on his medical record. He would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair, relying on the little savings he had left. He was eventually kicked out of his house because he couldn't afford his mortgage. Thanks for watching. I had to drive faster. Luckily, I didn't get a ticket. By the time I finally made it back to my company, I was 1 minute late past the time I should have been there, and my boss was already in a meeting with the CEO and his team. "What the hell are you doing here so late?" "I'm sorry, I had an incident on the way to work and stopped to help a pregnant woman." Those are just excuses for not doing your job properly. Why do I care if there was a pregnant woman asking for help? Weren't there other people to assist her? It seemed urgent. She was about to give birth. Others would have taken care of it. Or do you not see that our work is more important? Right now, you're going to pack your things and get out of my sight. You're fired. Hello, my name is Aaron, and even though it might be wrong for me to say, I am a person who never arrives late anywhere, much less to my job. This isn't because of a learned habit, nor is it because the telecommunications company I work for made it a mandatory requirement when signing the contract. Although, I will talk about this later, my boss did tend to be very strict about his employees' punctuality. My habit of always arriving early to places stemmed from a growing anxiety that had accompanied me since childhood. Therefore, if I had to be somewhere at a specific time, it was very normal for me to arrive up to 10 minutes early. This was a quality that benefited me when I was hired, because as I mentioned, my boss seemed to have a particular grudge against people who did not have the discipline to be in their respective offices on the dot. If one day you think about being late, or even worse, not showing up to work, you can excuse yourself from ever appearing at the office again, because you will be fired.
And what if we have an emergency?
There is no such thing as an emergency. If you really had to go somewhere, you would have informed us in advance.
That's why they're called emergencies.
The only way I would accept you not being on time is if you had a serious accident and were practically dead. And even then, I would want to see the corresponding medical documentation to verify your story before firing you. I can't have lazy people making up excuses to avoid covering their position. It wasn't just paranoia about being in the office fulfilling the schedule without any failure. My boss also seemed obsessed with adhering to a specific plan within those 8 working hours. For instance, the coffee break had to be at 11 o'clock sharp and couldn't last more than 10 minutes. If someone needed to go to the bathroom, it had to be between 1 and 3 in the afternoon, and it couldn't take more than 5 minutes on the clock. If someone exceeded the allotted time, even by a minute, the boss would go ballistic. He would scold the person for their lack of punctuality and decorum, claiming they were wasting everyone's time with that attitude. Besides scolding them, he would assign them more tasks or make their day more difficult. In the end, with this psychological mistreatment, most employees opted to stay seated at their desks and not risk taking breaks for fear of exceeding the established time.
Aaron, have you heard the latest news? It seems the CEO's sister is coming to visit the office next week.
Ah, is that why the boss is so stressed? He's been growling and breaking more things than usual these days.
Probably, you know how he gets every time the CEO comes to supervise. Imagine when he wants to bring visitors as well.
That day we'll have to be here an hour early to clean and practice military greetings, I can imagine. Who is this supposed CEO's sister anyway, and why does she have to come? As I was told, the lady in question was another successful entrepreneur who owned a very well-known cosmetics brand in the country. At the moment, she was on pregnancy leave. I couldn't remember well. The point was, she hadn't been working for a couple of months and would still be absent for the rest of the year. Her brother, the CEO of this company, and my boss's immediate superior, had invited her to take a look at the office, as they had recently renovated one of the floors and wanted to show it to her. Anyway, I wasn't interested. We all had to keep striving to meet our goals with or without visits. I didn't expect that a week later, while on my way to work, I would be involved in an unfortunate traffic accident. Fortunately, there were no injuries beyond the scare, and a few scratches for several drivers. But because a car ran a red light, several vehicles were involved in a minor collision in the city center. I was unscathed, and although my car wasn't as lucky, with a dented hood, it was still in good enough condition to get me to my office in time for my next shift. On another occasion, I would have stayed to fill out the corresponding report, but since I didn't want to get another scolding and possibly be fired by my boss, I thought it best to leave immediately. I would deal with the damages caused by the accident after my workday. However, I didn't count on another setback interrupting me before I could leave. One other person involved in the accident was a pregnant lady, and she called out,
Excuse me, could you help me get to the hospital? I'm in labor and I don't think the ambulance will arrive in time to take me there.
Isn't there anyone else who can take you? I'm already late for work, and...
Please, the hospital is just a couple of blocks away. I would go myself, but because of the accident, my car has a flat tire and it's impossible to move it.
Okay, I'll take you. But I'll only stay long enough to make sure you're attended to. I genuinely believed that if I hurried, I would make it to work just in time. But I was wrong. The traffic accident, which involved a dozen vehicles, caused a major traffic jam, making it an arduous task to reach the nearest hospital, to the point that by the time we arrived at its doors, I had completely abandoned the idea of being at my workstation on time. And, since I had given up that idea, I stayed at the hospital a while longer, accompanying the woman until her husband arrived and took over. We exchanged cards, and I left. I had to drive faster. Luckily, I didn't get a ticket. By the time I finally made it back to my company, I was 1 minute late past the time I should have been there, and my boss was already in a meeting with the CEO and his team. What the hell are you doing here so late? I'm sorry, I had an incident on the way to work and stopped to help a pregnant woman. Those are just excuses for not doing your job properly. Why do I care if there was a pregnant woman asking for help? Weren't there other people to assist her? It seemed urgent. She was about to give birth. Others would have taken care of it. Or do you not see that our work is more important? Right now, you're going to pack your things and get out of my sight. You're fired. I wanted to protest because my boss had not only fired me unfairly, it was the first time I was late to my job, and for a completely reasonable reason. But he had also yelled at and humiliated me in front of more than 30 people who were there with him at the time. But I concluded that it wasn't worth it. Perhaps it was better to accept my dismissal and look for another job where I wouldn't have to put up with a toxic boss giving orders all the time. And yes, I ended up going to my office to collect my things and leave. I didn't expect that a few hours after I left, the CEO of the company would call me to his office to discuss a private matter that supposedly concerned me, even though I had already quit my job.
You see, Natalie, the woman you helped get to the hospital, is my sister. She showed me your card when I went to visit her.
How? That's quite a coincidence.
It is. She was on leave from work due to her pregnancy, as the doctors said it was a high-risk pregnancy and recommended that she rest as much as possible. It's a good thing she found you during the traffic accident, because with the traffic and services overwhelmed, she probably wouldn't have made it to the hospital in time.
I'm sure she would have found someone to help her. It was all a fortunate coincidence, and I'm glad it turned out well.
Be that as it may, I've called you in to reward you for your good deed.
Apparently, when my boss scolded me in front of everyone and fired me, the CEO had wanted to intervene to stop him from firing me. But he couldn't, because at that very moment, he was called by the hospital to inform him that his sister was admitted and he had to leave immediately. Now, a day after the incident, the CEO had called me to thank me for accompanying his sister, who could have died if I hadn't hurried to get her to the hospital when I did. And furthermore, the CEO wanted to rehire me at the company, only this time in a higher position. My boss would take my previous position, and I would take control of that part of the company, able to boss my former boss around as much as I wanted. Or, well, that should be the dream of any employee who suffered abuse from any superior. The truth is, in my case, I didn't even have to try hard to make things difficult for my ex-boss, as he constantly violated the most basic rules and had an arrogant attitude, typical of someone who didn't think he had done anything wrong to receive such unfavorable treatment at work. It can't be. I've been demoted from my position unjustly. And why? Just for demanding a minimum of punctuality. You should discuss that with the CEO. I'm in charge now, and I've asked you to make some photocopies. I'm not interested in your problems with the CEO. You're not interested? Well, you sure have taken advantage of it, and I'm not going to make any photocopies. That's what these other workers are for. I have more important things to do. My ex-boss turned out to be such a problematic employee, refusing to do tasks or doing them in the crudest way, that I even wondered how he had managed to get the position of boss. I talked to the CEO, and it turns out my ex-boss was in his position because his father had been a man of money and power, who had probably put him there as a favor. But that favor was about to end because it was impossible for someone with such an attitude to remain in the company. Having obtained the CEO's blessing, I made sure to fire my ex-boss. He didn't take it well, throwing one of his tantrums where he shouted and even destroyed office equipment. The police had to come to take him away, and he was arrested for causing a disturbance at our workplace, destroying private property, and even trying to assault me.
Thanks to my ex-boss being taken to jail and finally fired from the company, many people were encouraged to speak out and share the bad experiences they had with him at work. A collective lawsuit was then filed for multiple abuses, and in the end, my ex-boss was sentenced to 4 years in prison. We later heard that just months into his time in prison, he was complaining about the food and insulting the guards. They ended up starving him for 2 days, and he has become so pale. Just last week, we received information that my ex-boss tried to separate a fight between some gang members in prison, but they both turned on him and beat him so badly that he got a black eye. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we will try our best to reply to your comment. Hi, my name is Samir, and the day my father told me about Wendy, I remember the look in his eyes. It was that glint of youthful excitement, a spark I hadn't seen in years. As I watched him talk about her, describing how they met by chance at some art gallery, I felt a strange pang. I hadn't seen my father look so alive since my mother passed away, but I couldn't shake the sense that this was too good to be true. She's just incredible, Samir. She makes me feel like I'm 25 again. Isn't it something? I feel energized whenever I'm with her. Yeah, Dad. That's great and all. Just take things slow though, okay? I don't want you getting hurt. I will, Samir, I will. I forced a smile, nodding as he spoke. But deep down, I felt unsettled. My father, Rafiq, was a smart man. He'd built his wealth from the ground up, turning a small company into a multi-million-dollar empire. But now, facing his 70s and an illness that sapped his strength day by day, he was vulnerable. And I feared that this new woman, Wendy, knew it. I just had a sneaking suspicion that she was a gold digger. A few weeks later, my suspicions deepened. I'd come to visit him as usual, expecting our quiet afternoons, but instead, Wendy was there, draped across the couch in a silk dress, her blonde hair spilling over her shoulders. She looked at me with a smirk as I entered.
So, you're Samir. Your father described you perfectly.
That's right. It's nice to meet you, Wendy, I replied politely, reaching out to shake her hand. But she only stared at it, then looked away, as if I were an annoyance.
Rafiq talks about you all the time, but I can't say I understand why. It's hard to see how the two of you are anything alike, but no matter. You know you don't have to come by so much, right? He's got a new family now. Me.
Not now, Wendy. Don't tease him like that. Samir will think that you are serious. My father said it, his hand gently touching her shoulder. She softened instantly, giving him a fake smile that vanished the moment his gaze shifted away. Instantly, I knew my suspicions were correct, and that my father was under her spell. I was so confused as to how he didn't see what she actually was. Over the next few months, Wendy's behavior only got worse. She was unbearable, even cruel. The nurses who came to care for my father started calling in sick or leaving early, claiming they couldn't stand her constant berating. I watched her closely, noticing how she reserved her venom for everyone except my father. One of the nurses even told me that Wendy had slapped her for not making her dinner. The nurse's one and only job was to care for my father, but Wendy treated them like slaves. After hearing one too many complaints, I confronted her in the hallway as she yelled at a poor nurse who'd only forgotten a napkin. She held the nurse by the wrist painfully. I knew that I had to intervene, as it was obvious that she was going to really hurt her if I didn't.
You worthless idiot. Your job is so simple. How could you possibly screw up so much?
Wendy let go of her. You can't speak to people like that, Wendy. Especially not the people helping my father. What is wrong with you?
You think you can tell me what to do, little boy? I don't care if you're his son. I have complete control over your father. Rafiq is mine now. You don't get a say, Samir.
Blood is thicker than water, Wendy. Believe me, your days are numbered. When I mentioned her treatment of the staff to my father, he just shook his head, dismissing it with a tired smile. Oh, Wendy's just got a strong personality, that's all. I'm sure it's all a big misunderstanding. You know it's been a long time since I had anyone care about me like this, Samir. I need this. I bit my tongue, not wanting to argue. I could see how much he cared about her, even if she was only after his money. I could practically feel her digging her claws deeper into his life, his finances, his house. And then, all too soon, he was gone. I got a call in the middle of the night from one of his nurses saying that she had wished him a good night and hours later, when she went in to check on him, he had passed away. In the days after his passing, Wendy seemed more irritated than sad. I'd catch her around the house, rolling her eyes or checking her watch as people offered their condolences. I felt sick every time she spoke his name, sick at the thought of her by his side in those final moments, spewing more poison into his life. After the funeral, I met with our lawyer to go over the will. As his only son, my father had made me the executor. Wendy wasn't invited to that meeting, and I felt a rush of satisfaction knowing that for once, she was being left out. The lawyer slid a letter across the table, sealed in my father's handwriting.
"This is for you, Samir. He asked that you read it before anything else."
With shaking hands, I opened it, my father's familiar script unfurling before me. "My dearest Samir, if you're reading this, then I am gone. I hope you know how much I love you and how proud I am of the man you've become. I can only imagine the burden this leaves on your heart." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. I continued reading. "There's something you should know about Wendy. I discovered, too late, that she wasn't who I thought she was. I began to suspect her motives as my health declined, and I realized she was only interested in my wealth." I clenched my fists, the anger bubbling up as I read on. "I didn't know how to end things with her without making a mess of it, so I planned a way to protect you from her. Our marriage wasn't real, Samir. I arranged for an actor to perform the ceremony, a trusted old friend. We never filed anything legally. Wendy has no claim to my estate. I suspected that there was a chance that she wasn't genuinely interested in me. I figured even though our marriage wasn't real, that I could make it up to her by leaving her something in my will. But once I found out that she was only with me for my wealth, I knew that I had made the right choice." The relief washed over me, but then the final lines made my blood run cold. "One last thing, son. If something seems off about my death, trust your instincts. Be careful." I leaned back, the pieces falling into place. Wendy's impatience, her irritation, the way his health seemed to nosedive in the last weeks. It wasn't just age or illness. Without knowing if it was true or not, the thought that she had poisoned him flooded my mind, and I couldn't escape the thought. Rage took over as I pictured her, the cruel smile she'd give behind his back, her fake sobs at the funeral. I needed evidence, proof of what I thought that she'd done. I had a friend who works as a coroner for the police take a look at my father's body on the down low. I wanted it to be kept a secret if it turned out that nothing fishy had actually occurred. But as it turned out, my father had been given a lethal dose of very rare poison, something that would be incredibly uncommon. Knowing that there was a good chance that he was murdered, my friend brought the evidence to his fellow officers who opened up a case and began to investigate the crime. A few days later, I called Wendy over, saying there were important estate matters to discuss. She arrived with a smug look, no doubt expecting a windfall. When she entered the study, I greeted her coolly, knowing that while she was with me, that police were combing through her home for evidence of the poison that had been the cause of my father's death.
It's about time you got around to sorting things out. I have expenses, you know.
I stared at her, the disgust in my eyes barely hidden. Before we get to that, Wendy, I wanted to talk about my father's last days. You were one of the few people taking care of him after all.
Yes, I took care of him. I was there for him, unlike some people.
It's interesting, actually. I went over his medical records. He seemed to be getting better for a while, then suddenly declined. Rapidly.
Are you suggesting something, Samir? I mean, people pass away all the time.
Suggesting? No. I know. I leaned forward, my voice a low hiss. I know you poisoned him! For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a laugh.
You're delusional. I loved him, and now as his widow, I'm entitled to what he left behind.
I couldn't help but laugh. I leaned back, crossing my arms. That's just the thing, Wendy. You're not his widow. The marriage wasn't real. My father knew what you were after from the start. You have no legal claim to a single cent.
What? That's impossible. He loved me.
Loved you? Maybe for a time. But he was never blind. The police are currently at your home, Wendy. They're very interested in why my father's body contained traces of poison.
You're lying. You can't prove anything.
We'll see about that. In the meantime, I think you'd better start preparing for what's coming.
You can't do this to me. I gave up everything to be with him. I deserve his fortune.
What you deserve is exactly what you'll get. A long time behind bars. And when you get out, there'll be nothing left for you. You've wasted years for nothing. She lunged at me, fury and desperation driving her. But I stepped back in time to trip her and cause her to stumble and slam into the wall. I heard a crunch as she slammed face first into the wall, and when she turned away from the wall to look at me, I saw that she had broken her nose. It was pouring blood down her face. Hearing the commotion, a police officer that had agreed to accompany me to confront her entered the room, restraining her. She was screaming, cursing my name, vowing revenge, but I felt nothing but relief as he dragged her away. Later, I got a call from my coroner friend, who told me that they had found several vials of the exact same rare poison that had killed my father in Wendy's home. Not only that, but they even found her diary, which outlined what she did and what she intended to do next. She had a list of several men that were like my father, old, rich, and single. She clearly was planning on doing to them what she had done to my father, and I had thankfully helped stop her. On top of that, they found several guns, and she had described that she was planning to shoot me and make it look like a robbery, and all because she found me to be annoying. The woman was truly unhinged. Soon after her arrest, she was brought before a judge and a jury that heard her case and all of the evidence against her. No one in that courtroom felt an ounce of pity towards her, and they found her guilty on all charges and sentenced her to 40 years in prison. It was a shock that they had sentenced her for such a long stretch, but I was glad. It meant that she would spend all of her youthful years behind prison bars. The one thing she valued more than anything was her beauty, and it would waste away before she ever saw freedom again. I couldn't bring my father back from the dead, but I took comfort knowing that my father had seen through her lies and had made sure that she wouldn't get away with his murder. The sad thing is, if she had truly loved him and had been genuine, then he would have made her into a millionaire overnight by willing her a huge fortune. But instead, his foresight had helped bring her to justice, and she will be left old, poor, and miserable. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
Stop this, Harper. That's my brother.
What? You have a cripple as a brother? Oh my gosh, I can't believe this.
Harper, can you stop it? Stop looking down on him. He's crippled, but not dumb.
Aw, the orphan sibling is defending her crippled brother. Ugh, Victor, how can you let her bring a crippled man in here?
It's my freaking wedding, Harper. You don't get to have a say in whatever I do. And Scott is my brother. Stop talking about him in that manner. My wedding day was nearly ruined by my insane sister-in-law. After my parents' death, my crippled brother had relocated to Italy, but I remained here in Canada. I was working as a nurse when I met my husband Victor at the hospital. He was rushed in one day after being involved in a terrible accident. It affected his spine, making him only have a 39% chance of walking again. After 2 weeks, they brought in a therapist to help him with walking. Whenever she wasn't there, I helped him. I wanted him to walk again, no matter what. One day, I was in the middle of his sessions when the door swung open and 2 women walked in. I could tell they were his mom and sister, seeing the resemblance. However, I wasn't pleased by the girl's behavior. She'd rudely brushed me off and hugged her brother, crying. I concluded that she only did that because they hadn't seen him since the accident happened. But after that day, the girl, who I learned was Harper, his sister, got worse. She strangely didn't like me for no reason. I stopped visiting his ward for a while. After a week, I returned. It was at night when his family wasn't present. As I walked in, I saw the joy on his face. I checked him and saw that he'd made progress and could stand on his own and take a few steps. I was so excited. He asked for my name and I told him, before I finally left. The next day, I was told by the doctor that he was requesting my service and had to be assigned to him again. I was happy, knowing that I could take care of him again. When Harper returned and saw me there, she was visibly angry. She called me out and I followed.
Why the hell are you here again?
Your brother wanted it. What's your deal with me?
Well, you're my brother's exact type, and I can't stand him having anything to do with a low-class nurse like you.
Low class? Her brother's type? Before I could speak, she stormed back into his ward. I didn't know what to do. On one hand, I wanted to take care of him, but on the other hand, I didn't want to be looked down on like that. I called my brother and told him about it. He asked me to ignore her and go on with taking care of him if it was what I wanted. I followed his words and ignored Harper's foolishness. After 2 months, Victor was finally able to walk again. On the day he was discharged, he requested my phone number. I was hesitant at first, but when he continued pleading, I had to give it to him. We began talking from there. I couldn't deny that I'd developed feelings for him. Victor was also my type, just as Harper said I was his. When he asked me to be his girlfriend, I didn't hesitate before agreeing. I told my brother about everything, as he was my most trusted confidant. He supported me all through. When Victor proposed marriage, I agreed. My brother couldn't be happier. He'd cried over the phone when I told him about it. I thought about introducing him to Victor. Since he wasn't in the country, we had the introduction over a video call. We spoke at length, and I felt so proud seeing how they spoke like longtime best friends. Although Victor has seen him in a wheelchair, he didn't speak about it until I did. I explained what happened and how it affected us. He sympathized with me and promised to always protect me. I knew I'd found where I belonged, and it was with him. It was soon time to introduce me to his family. My only fear was Harper. His mother wasn't too much of a talker, but she wasn't rude. In fact, she used to get me little appreciation gifts while Victor was still at the hospital. When we got to his house, Harper answered the door.
No way, Victor! What are you doing here with her?
Victor ignored her and took me in with him. Harper followed us to the living room. As I sat with Victor, she stood before us with crossed arms.
Wow, I can't believe this. You really did seduce him because I said you're his type, didn't you?
I didn't seduce your brother. I would never stoop so low for a man, Harper.
Oh, trying to be a saint, I see. Well, let's see how long you can keep that up.
She took her seat opposite us as her parents walked in. It was the first time I was seeing Victor's father. He had a stern look, but he was so nice. They didn't ask us too much. They seemed satisfied to know how we felt about each other. With the introduction done, we proceeded to make wedding plans. But Harper was bent on frustrating me. When I wanted to go shopping for my gown, I'd wanted my cousin to go with me, but Harper told me she wanted to go with me instead. I agreed, hoping we would finally get to bond. Well, we arrived at the shop, and things seemed to be going well at first, until it got to when I began testing the gowns. Harper continuously said they were ugly. I kept changing dresses until I got to the last one. I was exhausted already. I thought it looked perfect on me, and fortunately, so did Harper. She rushed to me and pulled me into a hug. I was shocked for a second, but I hugged her back. Suddenly, and very swiftly, she ripped the gown open from the back. I quickly pushed her off. I checked the dress, and the tear had completely ruined the dress. What have you done?
Isn't it obvious? An orphan and low-class nurse like you should only be in rags, torn rags.
Tears immediately gathered in my eyes as I watched her laugh evilly. She left the shop without me. I couldn't leave the dress after it had been destroyed, so I had to buy it, regardless of how expensive it was. I called my cousin in tears and she came to my rescue. She helped with a better dress and paid for it, even though I told her it was fine.
You need to put that witch in her place soon, darling. She's growing too many wings.
When I got home, I didn't tell Victor about it. He hated how his sister always tried to get on my nerves, so I didn't want them having a fight over me. Anyway, our wedding plan continued to progress. Time flew so fast and the day finally arrived. Harper had wanted to be in my dressing room, but I refused. I didn't trust her one bit. My mother-in-law had also asked me to be careful around her.
I'm aware that Harper dislikes you. I know her more than anyone else. Don't let her close to you today. Trust me, she has plans to cause problems here.
I was surprised when the woman said that, but I took her advice. My female cousins were all around me to ensure my safety. I couldn't believe I was shaken because of Harper. Victor had called me over the phone to ask if I was okay. I told him about my Harper problem. It was then I also told him what had happened with the first wedding dress. Your mom also asked me to be careful to not let her get close to me, but it's what Harper has been trying to do all day. I'm scared. He assured me that I was going to be fine. He also promised to deal with her after the wedding. We were still on our call when I heard noises outside. I quickly rushed out with my cousins, and there, we met Harper with my brother. Even though I was so excited to see him again, I cared more about putting Harper in her place.
Get lost! Crippled people are not allowed here. You're not among us, you hear me? I'll be working for M&M soon, the top fashion brand in Italy and here in Canada. Do you know what that means? It means me and everyone here is better than you. Do get lost.
God, she's so foolish. Stop this, Harper. That's my brother.
What? You have a cripple as a brother? Oh my gosh, I can't believe this.
Harper, can you stop it? Stop looking down on him. He's crippled, but not dumb.
The orphan sibling is defending her crippled brother. Ugh, Victor, how can you let her bring a crippled man in here?
It's my freaking wedding, Harper. You don't get to have a say in whatever I do. And Scott is my brother. Stop talking about him in that manner.
Shut the hell up, Chloe.
No, you shut the hell up. Are you crazy? I've kept quiet all this while, but it doesn't mean I'm stupid. One more word from you and you're gonna hate me.
Do your worst, bitch.
I saw Victor walk toward her with so much anger, but his mom was faster. She landed a resounding slap on her face.
How dare you speak to them that way, Harper? But Mom, they're orphans and he's a disabled asshole. They're clearly only after Victor's money.
This is where I speak, young lady. I'll start by informing you that I'm the owner of M&M, and trust me when I say you won't get to work there or any other fashion brand.
Yes, it was my brother's. After he relocated to Italy, he started a fashion brand. He still managed my father's company while he grew his brand. I was shocked to see how far he'd taken it. He established another company in Italy as my birthday gift last year. I handle it from over here while he also helps me, alongside his trusted employees. I only worked as a nurse to pass time.
Do you think we're poor nobody's brat? My sister owns Tycon Production in Italy. I'm sure you've heard of it. And by sister, I mean Chloe. Aside from Tycon and M&M, we have one more company. Just so you know, she's wealthy enough to take care of you for the rest of your miserable life. She only works as a nurse as a hobby.
I smiled at the shock on her face. Victor knew about my company, but he had no idea about my brothers, so he was also shocked.
If you don't believe me, try reaching out to the company tomorrow to reject your dismissal.
That's what you get for being so evil.
You call them orphans, but I'm glad they know who their real parents are.
Victor, let it slide. Tell me what you mean, Victor, right this minute.
You're adopted, Harper. They knew their parents, you don't. Is it clear now?
I was shocked. She wasn't their child? She was already in tears now, but no one seemed to be shaken. Her face was full of shame and regret. She tried to run, but my brother tripped her and she fell face down, breaking her nose in the process. I screamed in shock when my brother stood up and moved his wheelchair away. He walked over to Harper and squatted.
I am not a crippled man anymore. Stupid. Now get your unfortunate self out of here.
Harper stood up and ran away, her nose bleeding. No one followed her. No one seemed to care. I rushed to my brother. How did it happen?
The doctors suddenly told me I'd improved, placed me on therapy for a year, and here, I came to surprise you with it.
I pulled him into a hug, nearly crying. I hugged him like that for nearly a minute.
That's enough, siblings. We have a wedding to continue.
We all laughed and went back in to finish our preparations. Harper? Who cares about that loser? Absolutely nobody. Our wedding went smoothly, but by the time we got home, we received a call from a hospital. Apparently, Harper had been crying after hearing she was adopted and was about to cross the road when she was knocked down by a bike. From what the doctor said on the phone, she might not be able to walk again. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.